Hello and welcome to another episode of Soul Nectar Show, that show that talks about all things essence, where we gather around the campfire and we share our stories of connection to that which is bigger than us, to the divine presence, whatever your name for that is, universe, God, source, creator, Yeshua, no, all of it's welcome. And we talk about, what is this thing we're doing here? We hang out in the question and the inquiry, and that opens up some really cool stuff. So this is what we're here to do. I'm your host, Kerri Hummingbird. I really love these discussions. This is my favorite thing to talk about. I like to know the big why, and then I like to talk about all the little ins and outs of how the why happened. And I like to understand it and try to put some context and framework to it and bring things to a higher perspective. It's just what I love, and I love doing that with my clients and my students, and I love doing it with all of my friends out there in the light leaders of light community, including our guest today, who is Diane Shrock. Welcome, Diane.
Hello. Hi, Kerri.
So
I
glad
love
you're
being here.
here.
This is great.
This is
Soul
so
nectar. I can't wait.
Soul Nectar, and we have in common that we both lived in Silicon Valley for
Yes.
over a decade, and then we're both living in the Austin area, which is so cool. We've
I
experienced both.
know.
They're so similar. So Diane, just a little bit about her. She's going to tell you more about herself, but Diane is not only a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified high performance coach, she's a tenacious believer in the ability of each individual to live a wholehearted, joyous, and successful life. She's also a smart cookie who realized that people need different types of support. So she took the best paths of her coaching practice and built high impact tools for people to use on their own. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because we were talking about the empathy and so many things in our conversation
Oh, sure.
before
Yeah.
we got started here. So we're gonna let the conversation meander. But first, we want to hear about you, Diane. We want to hear about your story, your journey, your soul's journey. How has it led you to where you are today? What are some gold nuggets you want to share with us from your journey?
Oh, man, the journey. Well, it's still, it's still going. I'm
It sure
still
is.
like churning and moving forward. And I love that, once I figured out that I was a growth person, because I didn't know. I just thought this is the way I am, and everyone's like this, and everybody wants a challenge, and everyone who wants to learn new things and grow. And not necessarily. I think we all learn and grow, but some of us just hunger for it, and I'm one of those people. Like I'm just a nut. Like every test I've ever taken online, it's like I'm an input, I'm a learner, I'm the person that's like, how can I know more and do better? So I don't know if I was born that way, or my brother kids, he makes a joke and he's like always kidding me that I came out with like a therapist glasses and a little clipboard for notes,
I
like
so
out of
resonate
the
with this.
womb that way. Yeah. He's like, you were born to do this. And I have to agree, I first, when I thought about what kind of career path I wanted to take, I was thinking, because I was pretty athletic into sports and pretty good at it. And I thought, well, maybe I'll be a PE teacher. I mean, first I was going to be a dental hygienist because I thought that was cool, teeth. And then no, that's not happening. Then I thought, well, I'll be a PE teacher. And then I got into college and started competing with other men and women that were real athletes, and I was
Yeah,
like, this is not my thing.
that moment of
But
realization.
right, I'm looking around like when I was playing softball, I was afraid of the ball. Like it was coming at me so hard. I'm like, I don't want to do this. This is not my thing. So what I did get is that I really am intrigued by human behavior. Like it's always been like I read about it and I'd watch it. I people watch and I just, I was so intrigued and trying to figure out why people did what they did. So it's so great that you say, what's the big why? I, that's a question I ask myself every morning. What is my why today? Why am I getting up and doing what I'm doing? And why are other people doing that? And how can I serve them at the highest level? So, marriage family therapist, I'm licensed in California and Texas. I see clients virtually so I can see them, without having to be in the chair, although I spent so many years in an office in a chair. So it's kind of freeing to not be doing
Yeah,
that
to be
right
in your
now.
own space. Isn't it great?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I got involved with coaching. And I decided, well, a lot of people are coaches. So what's that about? And literally, this is how I selected the coaching program. It was the closest one to where I lived. So Brendan Burchard, who's a really, very well-known coach in the industry and motivational person, and he had his trainings about 10 minutes from my house, just south of Silicon Valley. And so I thought, okay, I'll do his. So I did, and it was great, and I'm still certified. And I actually did some coaching for his clients for a while. Got involved, did work with Brene Brown and her the daring way. I was one of her first consultant in her program that she designed for facilitators. And so, been really steeped in human behavior, vulnerability, courage, what it takes to help people live that stunningly amazing life that I believe they were born to live. And if you hear anything in the background, it's just my dog. So
Yeah, doggies
she's,
are probably seeing deer or something like that and going, what
or
are
they're,
things?
yeah, or they hear my enthusiasm and they're like, okay, I'm excited too. So
Yeah, let's
anyway,
do
so
it.
that's like, so I, the coaching background, the therapy background, and the real strong desire to understand and help people be the best they can be. So I don't know if that's too much or enough, but
No, that's
there's
great. I
there's
share.
more.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna get into it. I share your fascination with people. It's when you were saying that, I was hearing myself in that, like, yes,
Yeah.
like I've always wondered, why do people act the way they do? Like, what is
Mm-hmm.
going on? I don't understand
Yeah.
why people act the way that they do or how they think the way that they do. Like, it's been an ongoing question of mine, especially you know in I think it starts in our family relationships when we're growing up. Like,
Sure.
why is this person's perspective like this when mine is like this, and they're saying this about me, but that doesn't seem right. I'm not feeling that way or thinking that way.
Right. Sure.
So why are
Yeah.
they saying that? And I remember being very young, asking those questions and not having any answer, any guidance on how to find the answer to that. So is that a similar experience that you had as well? Like, what's going on? How come these people's perspectives don't match?
Absolutely. Well, what I did is I was really curious. I've always been curious. I was always the kid in the classroom that was like jumping out of their chair to answer the question. It's
And
like,
everyone's
call on
annoyed.
me, yeah, super like, and the teacher, and then the teacher's never calling you because you're so enthusiastic. But um, I was always really curious. And what happened is I would look at other people's behaviors, and because of the faith that I was introduced to young early on, it was pretty judgment based, and so I would judge other people's behavior, and that didn't feel good to me because what happened is I was judging other people, but I also learned to judge myself very harshly, and it was oppressive at times, and probably walked me right into some OCD behaviors that were not, again, not healthy for me. It helped me then look at how can I manage the OCD, and what I learned is I have to get rid of this judgment, because this judgment is really, really self-abusive, really. And so that's when I evolved into and learned more and more about Brene Brown's work. And she really talks a lot about empathy. And I'm like, empathy, I've heard the word, but what is it? It's really walking in other people's shoes. It's getting that different perspective. And so as I increased my empathy, my judgment started to decrease.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, got it. I
Yeah.
was so thrilled that I was learning to do it's hard to do. It's an easy concept in a sense, but it's very difficult because we have these habits that we learned very early on, and then we practice those habits for like our whole life.
Yeah,
So yeah.
absolutely. I love that. Brené Brown was also one of my early entry points into this path 8 years ago. Was The Gifts of Imperfection was the first entry path with her. That was a great book.
Yes.
And I also was very judgmental of myself. Like, I had gotten myself into this little mental like, I like to call them thought tunnels. Like, there's like little tunnels through your brain that, like
Mm-hmm.
this means
Mm-hmm.
this means this and this and this, and then it leads back to the same part. So you're like in a little
Absolutely.
loop, and I couldn't get out of my loops, and it was like tightening me and making me tighter and tighter and
Yeah.
smaller and like more
Right.
and more like I can't move, otherwise I'm going to make a mistake. And then,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it was, and I was really convinced also that there was something wrong with me, that this is a piece I think is worth exploring too, is like, I think that we all are empathic. We just don't know we're empathic. We don't. So I was very empathic, and I was picking up on things in my
Yeah.
environment, but I didn't
Right.
know I was. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think there are there are people that are empaths, and that's kind of a whole different topic in a sense. But there are people that they feel other people's energy, like it's turned up to 10, whereas other people are maybe a 5 or a 2. They're not as tuned in to the energy of other people. So if you're an empath, and I am, I'd walk into a room and I could feel the energy of other people. And what I did is I thought that there was something wrong with me if they were feeling some negativity. So I would take that, and that's the judgment piece. Now, because I understand that, oh, I feel things, I feel what other people are feeling. Now I can use that as a tool to understand them better, but I can set some really good boundaries and know that that's not me. It's not mine. And that's been hugely, so I walk into a room now and I can connect with people, even if they can't connect with me, which sounds really weird, but I can have this sense of empathy and caring for them. And often, if people don't, I walk into a room and they might be like, who is this person? What is it? Often, because I'm open and I bring my whole heart to the experience, often that person will kind of like, oh, well, okay, she's safe. It's okay. Or she gets me, and that's that connection piece, because we're hardwired for connection. I mean, think of a baby. If a baby's not connecting, we get real concerned. And yet we're living in an environment right now where it's okay to be an adult and not connect. We're communicating with each other, but we're not often really connecting with each other. And this is, I want to just say, this is dangerous.
It is
This is
dangerous. I
dangerous.
agree.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, this is what I try. So that's so good that you said that. So I also have noticed, because I know now that I'm a super empath. I did not know
Yeah.
this was
Yeah.
a gift before. I thought like
Right.
everybody was this way, so why can't they know the truth? So I feel like the other thing I notice is that when you're super empathic, you can feel other people, and you actually can feel things about them that they don't know about themselves.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
And then I interpreted that as lying. And so then I would have this thing like, well, you're lying, because I know this is
Mm.
true. I can feel
Mm-hmm.
it in you, and I know you're lying. And they're like, I'm not lying. I'm not lying. And I was like, you are lying, because I can feel it. And they're like
Interesting. Yeah.
denying, right? So I realized that there was levels of knowing too. Like, actually, I've realized through the practice of actually becoming a healer and doing like my
Yeah.
spiritual work, like, because I've had to practice those empathy skills, I've realized, oh, Kerri, you know stuff about them that they don't know yet. And also because I've had
Right.
clients
Yeah. Yeah.
clients tell me, like, Kerri, those healing sessions, like where you told me all this stuff that I was in complete resistance to hearing, it took me 3 years processing that with a therapist. And you were totally right. But I know that now after 3 years of processing it with a therapist. So it took me a while to realize that my level of depth of knowing on what's going on with somebody is pretty deep. And so to have a little patience, but this takes time to figure out that people have different levels of awareness even about themselves.
Right. Right. Well, it's a practice. Okay. So first, it's like, what's going on, figuring it out. And this is like the emotional intelligence piece that I talk about and teach a lot to my clients, my coaching clients and my therapy clients, is let's first understand what is emotional intelligence. And it's being aware of knowing our feelings, like knowing what's going on for us, recognizing them. Once we recognize what's going on, then we can, how do we use them effectively? So there's this awareness, whatever it happens to be, I'm talking about emotional intelligence, emotions, but being aware, and then how do I use that awareness effectively so that it helps support growth? So that's really what we're looking at, right? So you know things,
I
but
know
you
way more
weren't,
than I think.
yeah, well, but you're discovering, I know these things, and then how the next question can be, so people that are listening to this, if you know something, that's great, but how do you apply it? And sometimes the way we apply it is not so cool because we're
Yeah.
not using empathy.
Right.
We might be using judgment. So you should know this, right? Like, you're lying. So that's judgment. Instead of, the next question might be, tell me more about that.
Yeah,
I
tell
want to
me
know
more.
more.
And
Yeah.
and also modulating it. Like, I think it's realizing, and this is where we have to step into our greatness and our own power. Like, just, you have to know your own power. Like, if you're one of these super empaths, then you just need to know, wow, I know a lot of stuff. Okay, is it relevant for me to share right now? Because that's the next question. Like, if the person's like with my client that I had, that I told her all this stuff, which is true,
Mm-hmm.
but then it
Mm-hmm.
took her like 3 years to process that. Well, that's a long time. So maybe there was a different way. And I have learned since then how to, because that was a question in my mind, like,
Sure.
well,
Sure.
that might have been too much information. So then we have to, then it's our level of mastery to go, okay, well, what does she actually need right now? Because that is too much. That's way too much information. There's no like breadcrumbs, right? So this
Mm-hmm.
is all levels of mastery, but the first starts with recognizing that your level of empathy might be greater than the people around you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I like to think of, I'm I'm the receiver of information that I don't have to hold. So let me explain. Like, I think of, those, like a dunce cap or a funnel kind of thing. So if you're wearing the funnel like a dunce cap, then there's very little that can get in from all the knowledge that exists. It kind of drips in. But if I turn the funnel upside down, then what's happening is I'm open to all of the knowledge. And then what I need drips down, right? Like, I don't have to be a smarty pants. I don't have to know everything,
Yeah,
right? I
exactly.
just need to be open to what is necessary for growth in that moment. It's a whole different, like, that was so helpful for me to know that if I am in alignment or in integrity with who I am and how I connect to all of this, the big why, let's just call it the big why in the world. If I'm in alignment with that, then the information or the knowledge, or I call it wisdom, that we need in that moment will be available for me, and I can share that with you, right?
Yeah,
I can share that
absolutely.
in a way
And
that you can
sometimes
get.
in a way that you can get, and then it's also patience. Oh my goodness, I've had to learn
Oh
patience,
man. Yeah.
because how many, and this is what I remind myself about this a lot, is how many times does somebody need to hear it until it sinks in? A lot. Like, there's a lot of licks into the center of the Tootsie Roll Pop. And I remind this, like, it took me a long time to realize, oh, White Eagle is my guide. I mean, how
Yeah.
many ways did
Yeah.
White Eagle show up for me? It's like, here's a White Eagle on the top of Mount Asankate that only you can see. And there it
Right.
is. Like, what else
Right.
do you need? I mean, I needed a lot of information, and I
Oh
still
yeah.
dismissed a lot of it. So, I
Yeah.
have to know for my own journey. Well, then everybody else is like that too on their journey. They need a lot of like those drips.
Absolutely. Well, one of my favorite stories that I tell is, I had a client that I've been seeing for a while, and I've been telling her basically the same thing over and over again, because you have to just like, you have to repeat it. They have to practice it over. So one day she comes into the office and she's so excited, like she's thrilled. And I'm like, what? And she goes, I have to tell you, I figured out what I need. And I'm like, hallelujah, yay. I said, what's going on? And she goes, I watched Oprah, and Oprah said, and then my client repeats exactly what I've been telling her for the last year and a half. Oprah got credit for it, but you know what? I was like, yay,
Yeah,
because
it doesn't matter.
I was just setting her up. We were practicing, and Oprah finished it, and she got it, and it was so beautiful. So sometimes the point of that story is that sometimes we're the person that warms people up, and sometimes we're the people that get to deliver the wisdom, and that's okay with me. Whatever position or whatever my job is, I'm open to that, because the goal, the big why, is that I want you, if you were my client, to have the most stunning and amazing life that you were designed to have. You were born to have a stunning life, and lots of times things are getting in the way of that, and I want to help you get those things out of the way. And so whether, like I said, whether Oprah finishes it and drops the big aha, or I do, it really doesn't matter. That's important to me.
Yeah, I love the ahas, but yeah, it's the same thing. And I've realized I really prefer the aha moments, but then I realized that was my ego, and I was like, oh, shoot,
Exactly.
okay.
Yeah.
You just want to be
No,
the
I get
star of
it.
the show, Kerri. And here I am. And here I am. I was
Well, we're
so
human. We went, we're like, yay.
yeah, I'm a
Yeah,
star.
that was
So
me. Yay,
yeah,
I did that.
it was
No,
all
not so
me.
much. Not so
No,
much.
not really. So that's what I love about all of this conversation, is that there's so many ways that we learn. And I agree with you. Like, I think that in order to be what I would call a teacher, I think like there's some souls that have the role of teacher. And then there's some, and when we're teachers, we're also students. We're in that learning classroom regardless. Like, we want to learn, we want to grow. Then we're going to be expanding ourselves through a number of different experiences, but we're open to that. And there's people whose human design charts are fixed. That freaks me out personally. Like, as a person of growth, how do they
Yeah.
choose that? Like, I actually have a
Yeah.
curiosity about people that have fixed human design charts. Like, why? Like, and especially, like, why would you choose a fixed human design chart in the middle of the age of Aquarius? Like, we're getting ready to like bust through and have
Mm-hmm.
tremendous
Mm-hmm.
change, and like right in that window of like huge change, there's people that choose to just be stuck.
Yeah. Well, it's a subconscious choice, I'm sure, but the way that I look at it, it's really helpful for me, is we are where we are supposed to be. Like, I don't ask me to explain it. I believe things happen for a reason. I hardly ever know the reason. Okay? Ever.
True
So,
that.
so when I see someone who seems to be more fixed in their approach in life, I'm thinking, well, I don't know what came before, what's going to come after that. And if you believe that people come back or live more than one life, then, and I'm not sure. I think it's quite possible, but I'm not sure. And other people are real sure, and other people are like, no way. But let's just say it's possible. Then that person might be in the long continuum of who they are. That's just a slice of where they're at. It's not defining them, it's just where they need to be right now. So my perspective can be very narrow, and I need to, like, hey, maybe I need to do a 360 on this, because I'm just seeing a slice of what's going on in that person's life. Does that make
Yeah, I
did
love
that
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
actually, and
okay.
that
Thank you.
resonates with the download that I was getting a little while ago when you were talking, which was a reminder from my guides about how, when we elevate up to eagle perspective, which, eagles and condor, they're the birds that can fly the highest in the sky.
Yes. Yeah.
And when we elevate to that high perspective, we see a beautiful tapestry of all the weavings, of all the colors and all the
Absolutely. Yeah.
textures. And when we come down into the woods, we go, oh, it's so dense in here, like it's sticky and it's oh. But when we're way up here, we see. So it's sort of like in that way, like, is that we're only seeing this little when we're stuck in the density, we're like, why? And we can be shaking our fist at God, but like when we see like the bigger perspective, it all sort of weaves together and makes sense, like you said.
Right. Well, and we're both wearing glasses right now, and there's a pretty high probability that if we exchange glasses right now, our vision would not be as good, right?
Yeah, we wouldn't
Because
see very well out of
we
each
wouldn't
other's
see it.
glasses.
Right. And so my perspective isn't the only perspective. I need to remember it's my perspective. It's maybe there's a reason why I need to see it that way right now for wherever I'm going and how I'm growing, but to be open to more than just what I'm seeing. It's so helpful for me to realize that mostly I don't know anything. And it's I'm not trying to be condescending or anything to myself. I just know that then opens me up to that funnel of what do I need to know right now. I don't have to be a smarty pants, like I say. I always joke about it, but I don't need. That's not important to me anymore. It used to be important to me because I am dyslexic. I grew up not doing well on tests and school, those, and that was very shaming for me, and I would try to hide, and I would literally pray, please make me smart, please make me smart, please, whatever it takes. I don't care about anything else. I just want to be smart, right? And that has shifted, 180. Like, I don't need to be smart. I just need to be open to what is needed right now in the moment. And actually what happens is it kind of makes me smarter doing
It
that.
totally makes you smarter.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
realized this long ago because I noticed right from the first job I had that people would get into this right and wrong game, and they would get
Oh,
all
yeah.
tight, and it just got tighter and tighter and tighter.
Right. Right.
Like
Sure.
arguing over these little tiny things. Like I was in documentation, and so they would argue over this style. Oh, if you don't like that kind of thing, don't become a documentation person
Right.
and go into a
Exactly.
style meeting. Like you're literally talking about the font used or the weight of
Right.
the font and when
Right.
exactly you use that weight and that of the font in the text, and it has to be applied just so, and if it's not correct. And then if you're going to do it that way, and I was like, you're kidding, right? I mean, I'm an artist, I'm a creative. I thought I am too big picture for this stuff. Like I can't do this. It's driving me crazy. I understand,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I had to actually, it was a useful thing to go through though, because what it did for me was it refined my focus. It sort of like gave me structure, which I didn't,
Mm-hmm.
I needed some structure with
Mm-hmm.
all this
Sure.
wild creativity that was going on. And it made me realize the importance of when you do have discipline and you do have structure and you do apply things, across the board with some sort of like consistency. What happens is then it creates this beautiful container, and I would call like that consistency and that discipline the masculine. Then it creates this foundation where you can really explode your creativity, and it's like
Mm.
it has like a depth and a strength to it now because it's
Mm-hmm.
got this solid foundation. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think it does. I mean, it's kind of like, anything. When you start doing something, you build a foundation for it. And once that foundation is solid, then you can do a lot of creative things around that with that stronger foundation and that stronger knowing. And I know it makes perfect sense. And so whatever it is, if I'm learning about human behavior, to have a good solid basis of human development is very helpful. But I don't have to just stay there. I can add more to that, learn on many different levels how to apply that knowledge. So I love that. That's, it's a tool.
And I would say like, and I'm so glad that came in because I often wonder, why am I bringing this up? And then it makes sense later in the conversation, is because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like where we need to go a little bit is like the psychology model. I think that you came up in the psychology model and it's really good. There's a lot of good information there. And like you said, there's a lot of like very technical, good information in that inquiry. And there's so much more juicy stuff that you can put into
Mm-hmm.
that, once you
Mm-hmm.
know how to, like my teacher used to say, my art teacher used to say, Kerri,
Mm-hmm.
once you learn the rules of creating a painting, you can break them all.
There you go.
But you have
That's
to
it.
learn the rules first.
Right. No, I love that. I mean, my website is simplyshocking.com, and that simply is there on purpose because I need the simplicity in my life. I need to distill things down, and then I can add complexity on top of that. But if I start with complex, I'm overwhelmed. I'm lost. and particularly since I'm dyslexic and I'm not super great at seeing things in an organized way and thinking in an organized way, simplifying helps me. It gives me that platform to be open to the more of the knowing, the deeper, complex knowing. But simply Shrocking works for me.
Well, but I think that actually what I'm hearing from all the different threads of everything that you're sharing
Sure.
is that really what you've experienced is the shift from the sort of paradigm of the thinking to know, the thinking and gathering of information and rules in the little rule book, like this is how we do it, that
Right.
kind of thing, into like, is that really how we do it? And then the opening and the flow comes in, and then it like we did not plan out. I never plan out my episodes because I do what you say. I listen. I have the funnel, and the next thing comes in, and I go, okay, we're going to talk about that, and I just start talking about that, and it seems completely random, but it's completely not. When you look at, like, when you watch it back, you'll go, whoa, like all of that was relevant.
Exactly.
And we didn't plan it. That's the point.
Right. Right. Well, that's what I love about, I was thinking about being on your podcast and what I wanted to share. And then I thought, well, let it all go, because I know enough to be able to share what is important in the moment with you and with those that listen to this podcast. So it was really felt so great to just come into this podcast and just be, okay, let's see where it goes. And let's see how I can show up and be supportive in what you're doing and share what I'm doing and go from there. So I know we're with the EBC, the Evolutionary Business Council, and that such a great group that's how I met you. And that's a group of people coming together that's really looking at how can we have these really wonderful careers, and we've earned some reputation and some success in the world, and now how can we come together and add more strength to that and really get to that tipping point where the world is more empathic and more loving and compassionate. And that was the draw for me, and being part of a group of people who want to do that. So I'm so glad I met you. And we talked, and then we discovered we have some similarities.
We have a lot in common.
Yeah, and we're like, how is that? So we got here in different way, for sure. But we come to a lot of the same place of just wanting to help people understand them and then move them forward. And the success of your book. We were talking about how you're like, this book is just, it has a life of its own. People are reading it. It's at your bestseller list, and and every time we check,
it's like international bestseller for 17 weeks. I just checked it before this show, and I'm like, really?
It's so great.
It is, so, but what this really points to is even more of the same conversation, which is that it's the inquiry of it. We're not in the I know how it is, and this is my rule book. And that place is very tight and constricted. And it's also, it's not opening the conversation. Like, I think to be a really good mentor, and I call it mentor, you call it therapist. And, I think that it would be, you have to be able to listen to the other person, listen to the moment, and be open to what it presents, right? Just like this interview you were talking about. We didn't know what was going to happen on this interview. We were just kind of opening to what is possible and what's needed from me right now. And then the other piece of that is trust. It's like, trust that I have something that's going to emerge, and I don't have to like prepare it all to prove it, like who I am being in the moment is enough. And I think that gets back to the gifts of imperfection.
Love it. Well, by the way, that's my favorite book of Brene Brown's, is The Gift of Imperfection. And I have on my back wall,
I see that. I keep looking at it.
Yeah. And I think that understanding that's where we connect around our imperfections. So trying to strive, and I mentioned early on that I have obsessive compulsive disorder, and so for me, like, I was thinking that if I just could get it all perfect, then it all would be okay. And that just is not true. That is just not true. So I learned to embrace the imperfect, which helped decrease the amount of OCD that I have. And OCD is an anxiety disorder. So it reduced my anxiety, and it helped me open up to the possibilities that actually led me right here to this conversation. So again, just feeling so blessed that the steps led me right here today to this I think pretty stunning life, and I want to share that with others. I really do. That's if I want to just put out, and I do actually want to put out my platform that I don't talk about a lot because it's hard for people to hear about it, but there are a lot of children, young children, that are being abused in lots of different ways.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And my goal in life is to abolish child abuse. And I can't do that single-handedly, and I'm pretty certain that it probably isn't going to happen in my lifetime. But then I think if I can do something to help one child in one moment to reduce the abuse or eliminate the abuse in their life and help them move forward, that's my legacy.
I love that, and I resonate with that. And I've been working at it through a little different angle. I'm working on healing the mother wound work with
I
White
love it.
Buffalo Calf Woman.
Yeah.
And what I've been learning through this process is that really what we're talking about is that there's, we're up leveling our love mastery as a human consciousness. And so we're learning, and so the best way to do it is exactly what you're talking about. It's like we have to switch out of the thinking rule book judge thing into, okay, we don't know everything, okay, we're learning, and become curious in the moment, in present, with what's needed right now, what's needed right now, what's needed right now, or what's happening right now for me. If we can teach skills around, and this is where I get my pills not, skills not pills, because I really believe that we can teach skills and we won't need all the pills, to not feel like we can actually have skills, and then we don't need to have all that stuff to help us cope. I think it's learning how to be present, like you were talking about, become curious instead of judgmental, and then open up the channel. And then when you're open up the channel, then the next step comes in. You don't need to think about it. You just know. There's a difference.
Yeah. Being in the knowing is it's so comfortable.
It is. It's trusting.
Yeah, it isn't not comfortable in a
no, it's uncomfortable, but you're comfortable that through the discomfort it's going to happen.
Yeah, because there's a trusting. There's part of being in a good relationship is having a high level of trust, and people will strive to have that with other people, but they don't necessarily think of themselves. How can I increase my ability to trust my own intuition? And when you build that trust of self, again, game changer.
And you've done it through by stopping, with the Brené Brown work and the Brendan Bouchard. I know that he's also really much about curiosity and and trusting yourself and listening to your intuition and things like that. When we learn those skills, then, and also when we just realize that, I love you said that the glasses, that we're all in different, I like to call it thumbprint suits. Because the thumbprint is a unique print, right? So we each have a unique print. We're all in a unique little thumbprint suit. We're not having the same life journey. We're side by side, but we're having completely different life journeys. And we only intersect like the Venn diagram on pieces of it.
Yeah. And I like to look at it and tell me if this makes sense to you, is that we're human. Okay. I don't understand why we have to be human. I haven't figured out, I haven't gotten the answer to that, but it is necessary on some level. Don't ask me why. So we're human.
Yeah.
And that's the thumbprint part. And we're all unique in that humanness. We all look a little different. We all have different thumbprints. I believe that that spirit of who we are, the core of who we are, the essence of who we are is the same.
Yeah.
I think that it's same. And it's beautiful because the essence of who we are, I'm just going to call it love, call it whatever you want, joy, compassion. That's all the same, and that all fits together. But this humanness, it's the messy part, because we are different, and we want to be right. Like in our brains, I want to be right. I want to do it right, be right. I want to be the smartest. And that's that ego that you mentioned earlier. It's like, that's the humanness. And so just to know that being human is going to be messy. So tapping in to the more spiritual part of who you are will help with the messiness, and you won't get caught up in it, because you will then focus on what isn't messy, because spirit isn't messy. Spirit
Yeah,
is
spirit's very, and that's the eagle. It knows.
yeah,
The whole
it's
thing's
not
planned
missing.
out.
Yeah,
It knows
yeah,
what it's doing.
yeah.
It's a synchronistic engine. It knows exactly what each one of us needs in order to, learn and grow and
Right.
whatever else we're here to do, experience.
Well, right, and I can tell, like on the continuum, where I am in terms of my spirit and my humanness, because my humanness is more it's more individuated, it's messier, it's more reactive, it's more, it's more of that. And my spirit is more of calm, patient, loving. It's almost like the way the brain works, in a way, that prefrontal lobe part. It's like
Yeah.
you know um so then I know, and I can go, okay, so when I'm feisty and acting like my little 9-year-old girl, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm that little girl. I'm like all into my humanness, and that's okay. It's beautiful. In fact, what does the wise part of me, what does it know, and how can I apply that in that moment, so I can show up and be more present and be more helpful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And the wise part of you would never shame that little girl ever. So, I mean,
there's no point.
there
Yeah,
is no
yeah,
point to it. Yeah.
no point.
The wise
Like,
part,
she's been shamed already. She's
she's
had all
doing
the
it to herself.
shame.
Yeah.
She's done it to herself. She's had people shame her. The first 6 years of our lives, we learn things that affect the rest of our lives, and we don't even know. We don't know what shame is at 6 years old, and yet we've experienced it, and it shows up when we're 30, 40, 50. It's like, so a lot of what we're thinking and believing and what we're actually doing in life was instilled in us before we even knew what it was.
Yeah,
And
on
so a
purpose.
lot, yeah. So a lot, that's where this wisdom comes in, is that it helps us um, let go of some of those beliefs and patterns of being that do not work. It might have worked when I was 6 or 4, but it's really not helping me today.
Exactly. And it's that discernment to realize that that's how I can be present now with these uncomfortable feelings, because we
Yeah,
rub up against each other. We're like sandpaper sometimes on each other's energy fields, and we're like, oh, it feels yucky. And instead of, what I used to do is sort of blaming the other person, like, it's your fault. You're doing this, this, and this. I look for the reason why I don't like, why I'm feeling bad.
yeah,
Why am I feeling bad?
yeah,
Oh, because this person just did that and said that, and that's why. I would just make up a story about it. Now it's like, okay, well, no, I'm just going to be with the energy of it and go, yeah, okay, well, this is just my humanness rubbing up against your humanness. And there's something here that beyond us is getting orchestrated so we can smooth the edges out a little bit. And okay, so I just going to breathe through it, be with it. And then maybe an insight will then come in to teach me, oh, okay, I needed to learn a lesson around this particular thing.
yeah. That's the wisdom. That's the
That's the
spirit right
wisdom.
there. So you
Spirit.
drop into the spirit, and then you're in the inquiry. You're like, oh, what is there to know about the situation, the other person, and myself? That's the inquiry. That's the wisdom. When we do this, we're in the conflict. We're in the messiness, and that's the human. That's like, it's the ego. It's the I am. It's the here I,
Yeah, and
it's the
it's
little
also
girl.
what we talked about at the beginning. It's like the other person may not see what you see yet or ever, right? Yet or ever. The Venn diagram may never overlap in that way. So trying to force it doesn't work. And I've had to
No.
learn that the hard way. It doesn't
Me
work.
too. Me
So
too.
I think I've learned I just have to notice that that's happening, surrender it to my higher self, my soul self, and then just go, okay, what is there for me here now?
Yeah.
And then the insight comes in, and I may not like it. I tussle with it, I wrestle with it, I say, but it's not fair, but it's unjust, but this person should know better, but and still I know that either I'm seeing something the other person doesn't see yet or is never going to see, or I am just fighting with myself. So,
Mm-hmm.
this is what I finally have come to. And it's, I think letting go of our sense of injustice is the biggest one, I think, for me anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
letting go of that sense of injustice having occurred, and the other person isn't going to even acknowledge it or see it or anything. And that validation piece, it's like, well, okay, yeah, you've experienced this uncomfortable thing. Yes, you have. Do you want to stay there? No. Well, then you have to surrender
Yeah.
it. It's
Yeah.
let
Well,
it
and
go.
we don't always know the other person's path. And so I've had
No.
situations where I have been treated unfairly. It seemed very clear to me and other people around me it wasn't fair. Someone wasn't treating me fairly. So do I fight back, or or do I move forward? I don't sit back per se, because I think there is a sense of standing in our own integrity. But then I moved through it, and then I've had people come back to me like months and sometimes even years later and said, that worked with me, and said, "Hey, it's good to see you." Like at a gas station, I had this one woman said, we hadn't seen each other for a couple of years, and she said, "I owe you an apology." And I'm like, what's that about? She said, "Well, my friend said some things about you that weren't true and weren't right, and I didn't say anything, and I didn't speak up, and I'm sorry." And I was just like, "Thank you for that." I had already moved through that and moved past it, but the universe allowed me, thank you, the opportunity to reinforce that, that when I stood in integrity, that I was accurate. I was accurate in that moment and what was going on, but I didn't need to fight it. I didn't need to prove it in that moment.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
that, like that's happened to me at least 100 times in my life.
Yeah, it happens a lot to me. And
Yeah,
I also think it's just levels of knowing. And then I just go, okay, well, they're not having that lesson right now. So they're not on the same lesson plan.
of
They're
course
just,
they aren't. Yeah,
I mean, they're in
yeah.
my path right now just because I'm learning a different level of that lesson than they're learning right now. And it just, it just whatever. It just takes surrender to really, for it all, and patience. So we talk back to patience. It takes patience to figure out how all the pieces fit together, because the tapestry is like humongous and it's eternal. And, from the ego perspective, and so we're only in this little slice, like you were talking about.
Yeah,
We just have to
yeah.
have patience. It'll
Well, I
be
think,
known.
yeah, I love, you brought up patience a few times, and I think, there's never enough of it. It's like, I
Let's
think
could always
almost
use more.
everyone that I know and talk with, it's what are the three things you need to work on? And patience is usually in the top three. I think that patience, we can learn patience and still be growing and moving forward. A lot of times I think people think, well, if I'm patient, nothing's going to happen.
No, I
And
don't think
that's
it's that.
exactly not true. That's exactly the opposite, because when we're truly patient, then we're open to the knowing and moving forward. And that's where amazing growth happens, is in that resistance, when there's that time where we want to be impatient because we're like just feeling that, and then we move through that. And that's the blessing. But boy, patience, yeah, I'm with you on that for sure. I have that in my,
Yeah,
I have it in a little plaque in
little mantra.
my, yeah, my, love is patient and kind. And
There you go.
I'll stop and look at that. It's behind my stove, and I look at it, and I'm like, that's really true.
It's really true.
That's a big chunk of what love is patience and kindness. And when I notice that sign, it's probably exactly what I need to add more kindness and patience in my life right at that moment.
Beautiful. Gosh, I love this. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation.
Thank you. Same. Feel
Yeah,
the same.
wow. Opening to wisdom. I feel like that is what we've been discussing. That's really gorgeous. So, how do people get started with you when they want to work with you? How do they
Yeah, I'm pretty full in terms of, working with clients, but what I want to offer to people, on my website, I have I have a podcast called Truth and Double Daring. And what we do, what we do is we look at opening up to our truth. And then there's that dare of, where's that one area or that thing that you need to do that you haven't done yet. And so I interview people, and hopefully we'll interview
Oh
you
yeah, for
soon.
sure.
And look at moving forward. So I have over probably 60 or so podcasts that I've recorded, and I'm still recording more every week. And people can go and access that library of podcasts or sign up on iTunes or wherever they listen to podcasts. And I've also created an app called Dare You. It's Dare, D-A-R-E, with a U and an exclamation point. And it's a subscription. So I actually am charging for it, because what I want to do is I want people's $14.99 a year, because what I'm going to do with that is I am connected to a nonprofit called Legacy Collective, and they help support women and children around the world build businesses so they can educate and feed and house their children. So it all goes to that, like 100%, because I have enough abundance in my life. But I decided to create this app. So what the app does is it gives you a dare. I dare you once a day to increase your emotional intelligence, which is really increasing your wisdom, increasing your ability to connect to others and understand yourself better.
Oh, I love that.
So see, I have these tools. Everything is at simplyshrock.com, and it's SHROCK and then ING, simplyshrock.com. Everything's there. So I have blogs and podcasts, and you can download the app and just everything. But, and I just am so delighted to be able to share about the things that we talked about today, because it's, people need to know. And there's a lot, if we timestamp right now what's going on in the world today, there's a lot of lack of wisdom and low level of emotional intelligence. There's a lot of smarty pants out there. A lot of people are super smart, way smarter than me. Even people in my family, like I tell my family, I'm the dumbest person in this family. Like, they're so smart. But it's this IQ rather than the EQ, or the emotional intelligence, learning how to use your emotions in a smart way, effectively.
Yes.
So the Dare You helps with that. And then I go out, and I'm going out and, speaking of podcasts into audiences, and working with children and teachers and, pastors and rabbis about what is this emotional intelligence and why it's so important. So that's what I'm doing. And my website, give you a good head start. I even have a quiz, an emotional intelligence quiz
Oh,
on my
yay.
website. Yeah, so there's all kinds of good, great, fun stuff on there, and hopefully some helpful stuff, and it's all there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I will put that in the show notes for everybody, so you'll
Great.
have access to that, as well as access to your podcast. And I just really enjoyed this interview. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on Soul Nectar Show and share your wisdom with us.
Well, I can't wait to listen to it again.
I know,
'Cause
right?
it's
Like, I want to go
when
back and hear it.
when you're doing it, it's like you're in the moment. And then I'll go back and listen to a podcast, and I'm like, wow,
That's pretty
some,
cool.
listen to that.
Learn for myself.
Yeah, no, it was a blessing. Thank you so much
Really
for
good.
inviting me. And it was not only fun, but also inspiring for me. So
Beautiful.
appreciate
Yeah,
you.
me too. Appreciate you. Okay, well, everybody like and subscribe to Soul Nectar Show and like this episode and share it out so other people can find it, because that's how we get the word out is, there are actions that do need to be taken to get the word out. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
take the action, like, subscribe, and comment. And, if you put comments, we will reply. We will see them and reply, because we are human. We do check the machinery to see what it's doing. And so now I just like to offer you guys our weekly kisses. Would you like to join me in giving everyone kisses, Diane? Because we like to give.
I would.
All
This
right,
is cool.
here we go. We're
Okay.
gonna give them kisses.
Mwah.
Yay!
I love that. Here's another one. Mwah. There you go.
Love you guys so much, and hope that you have a really blessed week out there in Soul Nectar Showland. Bye for now.